You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. Happy February. It's almost Chinese New Year. That's one of my favorite events. I love that. We're talking about the Chinese New Year. I think this is the wood dragon. And so anyway, that's a good energy, and so welcome. I'm here with Joseph Selbie again. You guys may remember we talked about physics and God when he was here last. And excuse me, I've been a little hoarse lately. But tonight I want to hear about his new book, Break Through the Limits of the Brain. And the reason why I love what we're going to talk about tonight is because Joseph lives up close and personal to consciousness all the time. So Joseph, hi and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy it.
Thank you. So tell us about, you live in a spiritual community based on, and I'll let you tell more because I know little, but based on the teachings and the way to live by Yogananda, a very powerful yogi. So how did you come to live there and then surround yourself in consciousness? And how did that lead to the book you just wrote?
Well, I was very fortunate that in my college years, which were a long time back, I had a roommate who shared with me the autobiography of a yogi, which is written by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's considered a spiritual classic. I think by now
I love it. I love it. Mm-hmm.
It's been a powerful book for many people. Something like 30 million copies have been printed now. And that was transformative for me at that time in college. And by a series of steps, I ended up living in a community based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda called Ananda. And that's where I live today. I've been here almost 50 years, maybe not literally here, because I spent some time in Europe and I spent some time in Seattle, helping with getting communities started like Ananda here, where I currently live. And it's been an enormous blessing to be able to be, as you put it, just surrounded with conscious people, surrounded with people who are striving to become super conscious, striving to transcend what is our typical, ordinary, day-to-day conscious awareness, which is largely a matter of reacting to and being aware of the world around us through the senses and experiencing ourselves as a body, which, I still very much do. But being able to meditate regularly, being able to be reminded of higher potential, higher possibilities, has allowed me to transcend that somewhat limited awareness, conscious awareness, physical awareness, and feel myself as something more, as something super conscious. And with that expanded awareness comes joy, comes peace, comes creativity, comes concentration, comes so many things that make life more wonderful to live. And that led me step by step to writing, as you already mentioned, my other book, The Physics of God. and to writing break through the limits of the brain. And the reason I got interested in the neuroscience behind the book is that there's a lot of research done in neuroscience by people like Andrew Newberg and by the folks at IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and many, many others that indicate our brain is only part of the picture, that it's better to say that our brain puts us in touch with mind, puts us in touch with superconsciousness, and that it is not the creator of mind or consciousness. And that in order to have a expanded experience of yourself, of love, as joy, we need, in any way we can, and meditation is a key way, but we need to go beyond the limits that the brain tends to impose on our awareness. And those limits are primarily keeping us preoccupied with the senses and with the physical body. And by meditating regularly, we can regularly go beyond those limits and experience this expanded consciousness.
So one thing, and I've trained in shamanic healing techniques and things that we kind of new agey call energy medicine, that people who study this say isn't really energy, but the concept of the universal field. And anybody who's had a transcendent experience, or even a psychic moment, or now we might call a remote viewing moment, that you know something that has no place in the physicality of the time and space that you're sitting in, but somehow you know it, or you have access to it, and all of a sudden there's this eureka or astonishment that there is something outside of myself, outside of the thing I call me, that is connecting me to something else. And that opens a miraculous window. And so having you live and breathe in understanding consciousness, what is our current thinking about that universal field, or the field of consciousness that we all connect to? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, from a scientific point of view, which is about half of what my books are about, and the other half is about the sort of more subtle spiritual view. But from the scientific view, there's still not a lot of reliable evidence that tells us what superconsciousness is from that perspective. But as you say, you've experienced it, I experience it, thousands, probably millions of people experience something beyond themselves. And I think it's still true today that the primary way in which we learn about that and understand that is from extraordinary individuals like Yogananda, like Thich Nhat Hanh, like many others who did experience it so deeply that they could describe it to us, and describe to us, most importantly, how to get to that awareness ourselves. And what they say is that it's just the opposite of what science tends to want to say, which is that if there is consciousness, it will be the result of matter and energy having created it. What instead these extraordinarily spiritually advanced individuals say is that matter and energy are created by consciousness, not the other way around. That the underlying foundation of all reality is consciousness, and one of its expressions is the matter and energy that we experience consciously, each day in this world.
So one of the things that has been explained to me previously, Professor Laszlo, who studied and wrote about the Akashic field, who's a futurist, and he talks about the universal information field. And he talks about that is the dictator of our reality. Just as you're saying, I think he would say that that was consciousness is a field of information. And what I get, and I think what you're saying, or you're reminding me, is that we don't know the physical construct that takes. In your studies of the scientific side of it, do we know anything about a physical construct, whether it's atomic, electronic? Do we know anything?
Well, I think that the frontiers of physics today, and that's largely what's called M theory, has begun, that the physicists on the frontier and that theory have begun to posit that there is a non-local reality. And non-local is physics speak for a reality that doesn't behave like our local physical reality of which we're familiar, but that there is a subtler realm of pure energy which behaves in non-local ways, in ways that are part of what we get the notion of quantum weirdness from, is that things in non-locality don't behave the same way as things in our local physical universe. But that is the greatest stretch that established, recognized physics has achieved. Now, there are other experiments that have been done that hint at even more than that, but don't necessarily give us an explanation for it. So one example, one of my favorites, is an experiment was conducted where two people were put together in the same room and asked to meditate together. And after they had meditated together for a while, they were asked to stay in touch with each other. And it wasn't defined what that meant, to be staying in touch with each other, but they knew that it wasn't going to be staying in touch physically, because they were then placed in separate rooms, couldn't see or hear or communicate with each other in any way. They were put in what are called Faraday cages. They're sort of a box with copper wire all wrapped around it, which keeps electromagnetic radiation from getting into whoever is inside the Faraday cage. And then in one of the two cages, the person was hooked up to both cages, the people were hooked up to what we think of as lie detectors, where they have electro response in the brain can be measured by this machine. And then one of them was given a powerful stimulus. It was usually light, strong flash of light into their eyes, or a loud sound or whatever. And as you would expect, their EEG machine, their lie detector machine, showed a huge spike in brain activity because of that. But, and this is what is amazing, 50% of the time, the other person who couldn't see the flash of light or hear the sound also registered a spike on their EEG.
Well,
So,
I'm reminded, and maybe this is the same phenomenon. They talked about somewhere I read, maybe it was in Lynn McTaggart's book, The Field, when she described a lot of experiments, but they had a mother rabbit and they had the baby in a submarine hundreds of miles off the coast. And whatever happened to the baby, the mother rabbit registered it.
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the
wild.
same. I think it's the same principle.
Right.
And other experiments have been done in other ways that sort of echo this same concept, like you were mentioning, that shows us we're connected somehow. Some subtle energy is conveying this information between two people or between mama rabbit and baby rabbit. And that it's so far been unmeasured, but that doesn't make it non-existent. That there must be something. And you can think of it as a field of consciousness. You can think of it as a field of information. You can think of it as some kind of superconscious connection. But in all ways, we're talking about the same thing, whatever words we use, which is there is another level of subtle reality that connects us all, that is unlike the physical world where we are disconnected.
So what I love about learning about that concept or that the existence of that reality leads me to two things that are come over and over in my thinking a lot is if we are all connected through that, maybe, and we can talk more about this later when we talk more about meditation, maybe our ability to access that or even to recognize it exists should be a great promoter of us reducing our factions and our separateness and our disconnect that we're experiencing so much in the world right now.
I agree
Because
100%. One of the sort of foundations of religions, of spiritual teachings is, love thy neighbor as thyself. And if you can complete that thought, it's because he is thyself.
mhm,
And do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because they are, they are us. And the reason why that appears in so many spiritual traditions is because it is the answer to hatred. It is the answer to warfare. It is the answer to the kind of social strife that happens when people are at each other.
mhm.
Is if we could recognize and even more powerfully feel our connection to everyone, then we just won't act as if there is no connection, that what I do to you has nothing to do with me. If I realize that whatever I do to you is doing it to myself, and I literally feel that, the entire world would change.
Yes, and especially if you grasp, and this does kind of blow your mind, it's not the easiest thing to grasp, that subtle energy is actually the reality from which what we consider our personal reality is downloaded. In other words, where my head goes Bong is what we have in front of us is a projection of this subtle reality, and it's changeable. And so then my thinking almost on a daily basis is, when I talk about it as being a physician and a healer, how can I assist somebody? And I'm going to just use, you know, kind of lingo here, in downloading a new reality, in downloading a different destiny for their health, a different outcome. And when you recognize that what we have here is a projection of this vast, interconnected, subtle energy reality, then I'm led to want to strive to, how do I access that so I can help my patients access that and realize they can, I'm putting it in simple steps, download a different destiny. Does that make any sense?
Yes, and I think that whatever lingo we choose, when we do connect to this more subtle reality, it changes us.
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of that as downloading a new reality. You can think of that as rewiring the brain. You can think of that as awakening to spirit. They're all just different ways of describing the same transformative experience. In my book, Breakthrough the Limits of the Brain, I talk about it in terms of rewiring the brain, of changing the circuits that we have developed over the years in our brain that are like automatic responses to various things. So if we smell coffee, that will stimulate a circuit in our brain that kicks off the desire to have coffee. It kicks off thoughts about where I can get coffee. It kicks off thoughts about what's my favorite kind of coffee, where should I go and have some coffee, where's my coffee mug, all that sort of cloud of thoughts and feelings and memories and sensations all explode into our awareness by one stimulus. And that stimulus could be the smell of coffee, could be somebody mentioning coffee, it could be seeing your coffee mug. And I use this as an example that most people can probably relate to. If not coffee, substitute chocolate or whatever it is that is a favorite thing for you to drink or eat. And you'll recognize how multifaceted our response to things is. That's because over the years, we've gradually associated more and more experiences with one set of experiences. And these experiences then get supported by the brain creating and connecting neural circuits that respond to those stimuli and respond to those thoughts and emotions. Until after a while, typically by the time we reach adulthood, we will have created, or caused to be created is more accurate way to describe it. We will have caused to be created millions of these circuits. And they all have different stimuli. So you wouldn't think you have that many stimuli, but every piece of music you listen to is a different stimulus. And it may trigger a circuit in your brain that makes you feel positive about it or negative about it. Everybody you know, every situation you've been in, every movie you've ever seen, every inner experience you have, all have their own triggering circuits in your brain. Now, this can be very good if the triggering circuits are ones that, the triggered circuits, I should say, are ones that help you do things that you would otherwise have to remember how to do, like tying your shoes, brushing your teeth, fixing your breakfast. You know, we rely on these circuits to get us through our day efficiently and with the least amount of, mental focus to do it. And so in that sense, they're essential. But when we have all these other circuits that are not just physically oriented, but are emotionally and mentally oriented, what happens is that we go through our day and stimuli that match circuits appear, whether it's the smell of coffee or something your best friend said or something you read. These circuits that have been building up for years and years and years fire, and they're automatic. And whether we want to or not, we're all of a sudden having an emotion about that experience, because that's the emotion we tend to have over and over, and that's the what the circuit triggers.
And
So I likened it. Go ahead.
in a sense, it sounds like we are automatons.
There are neuroscientists out there who actually think we are automatons because of this overwhelming automatic response that our brain does. But we can, and this proves that we're not automatons, we can deliberately decide to have new experiences. We can make choices. And we can choose to avoid stimuli that we know are going to trigger these neural circuits that we don't want. So we can rewire that way. We can deliberately cultivate positive experiences that we want to have supported, positive memories, positive thoughts, positive emotions can be cultivated, and the same thing that can be negative, which is this automatic triggering of a neural circuit, can become our friend, can be positive. It can automatically trigger positive feelings, positive thoughts. And in that vein, we can rebuild our neural circuitry to automatically fire more things that are positive than are negative, and gradually even more and more things that are positive. Or we can, by meditation, transcend the physical body and quiet the brain. So left to its own with all the zillions of stimuli around us, the brain is like a fireworks show. It just keeps going off, a boom here, a burst of light there, emotion here, a thought there. And all day long, we have this fireworks show going.
And when we're going to try to shift our response to break a habit, takes unbelievable, incredible work.
Yes, there are ways you can be more efficient in changing yourself, be more effective in changing yourself. But there's no denying that if you're going to do it one thing at a time, if you will, create one new habit, cultivate one new experience at a time, you are going to find that it's a bit laborious. But if you can get beyond the brain, if you can get past the fireworks show, and meditation is the best way I know to do that, then instead of having to, choose to, I want to feel more positive about this situation, so I'm going to affirm things about that situation. I'm going to consciously think differently about it. Instead of doing that, if you get past all these automatic triggers and you dive into this infinite consciousness that is beyond the physical body, it comes with wonderful feeling. It comes with very elevated thoughts. It comes with peace and well-being and joy. And it's very powerful. So when it's very powerful, and as it's very powerful, it, more than any other method, rewires the brain. It creates new circuits rapidly that support this higher experience. You also have some more prosaic circuits that get produced when you meditate regularly, which help you sit still and keep you from fidgeting and tend to take you into concentration and focus rather than the scattering of thoughts that we normally experience. So you have practical circuits, if you will, that help you transcend the body. And then when you do transcend the experience of the body, then powerful new circuits are created that make that experience familiar and easier to get to. And this is, I don't know, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more effective than consciously building one circuit at a time in a methodical way. You can do that, but what I recommend is save that attention, save that more laborious process for establishing a habit of meditation. And then as you establish the habit of meditation, it does the lion's share of creating new circuits in your brain, of rewiring your brain for you. And you don't have to do everything in this, one neuron at a time sort of approach.
I love that. Let's take a short break here. When we come back, I'd like to talk about Yogananda, and I would like to talk about in more detail about meditation. But let's take a short break. Hi, everybody. I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine, back with Joseph Selbie. And I want to talk first about Yogananda. I don't know if you guys read the book, Autobiography of a Yogi. There's parts that every sentence has meaning. But to me, it was, and I read this years ago and I'm rereading it again now, it changed me. So Joseph, you live in a community based on Yogananda's teachings and that aspire to live by his teachings teachings not only of meditation, but of ways to breathe, and how to be self-realized. Could you tell us what you know about Yogananda?
Well, I can tell you some of what I know about Yogananda in the time we have available, but he has written many, many books and has a very rich tradition of teaching of his own and by teachers behind him. So it's not an easy thing to give you a full picture of his teachings. But I can tell you what drew me to them and what still I think today is the most important things to me. He was able to be extremely clear about a subject. He came to America in the 1920s And he, even then, was able to be extraordinarily clear about a subject that was very foreign to almost everyone in America and in the West in general. And he did so by adopting a Western vernacular. He didn't use a lot of Sanskrit terms. He didn't teach meditation and yoga and the practices as he would in India, where he would be speaking to people who had a background in a tradition of yoga. And so he was starting fresh, and he was starting from a Western perspective. And he also brought in science and Western science. He refers in the autobiography to physics, to neuroscience, to medicine, and he does so in very, very insightful ways. So that made it so accessible to me to follow these teachings. And if any of you are hesitating because of the name, Paramhansa Yogananda, he must be another one of those strange Indian teachers. Yes, he is a strange Indian teacher, but he's very, very understandable. And the only thing that makes it strange is that he's bringing teachings to the West that are somewhat new. He wasn't the only one to ever brought these kind of teachings, and he certainly isn't the last. But he brought them with a special mission to reach Westerners, and it really succeeded for me. So the core of his teachings are how to make contact with the divine, how to transcend the consciousness of the physical body and achieve superconscious awareness of the divine, to make a connection to a unknowable God, a being that we can connect to and will connect to us. And that he made it very methodical, the way that he explained how to do that. And one of the key ways is the technique of Kriya. He said there were two purposes he had in coming to the West, and one of them was Kriya. So that's how major it is. And Kriya is a advanced meditation technique that helps you become very, very deeply still and inwardly focused. And that allows you to have deeper and deeper experiences of the divine. But as you mentioned, he also talks about how do you take this approach to life, this higher purpose to life, and weave it in with an ordinary life. I have kids, I'm married, I started a business. I very much have led a life that, if you knew nothing else about me, you would say was a typical life. And yet I was able, from his teachings, to weave into that life, using my intuition to make decisions, drawing on subtle energy to have more energy, to feel more energized in everything that I do, to be more concentrated, to be more loving and caring towards others. All of these were not so much, mechanical things I was doing, as that I was awakening them through these methodical practices that he offered, and by embracing attitudes that helped me do that. So it was twofold. I got to live my life that would seem ordinary to most everyone, more effectively, more fully, more happily. And I got to use his teachings to dive into depths of peace and love and joy that I would not have reached any other way.
Well, I want to talk about the Hong Saw HONGSAU meditation. After we had our first radio show together, I went onto the Ananda website and kind of just browsed around and read some things. And one of the things that came to my awareness was a short video on a simple meditation technique. And I'll have to admit that my brain is constantly, talk about firecrackers, constantly going, multitasking in my day-to-day life, and sitting down to what I thought would be go blank to me had zero appeal. I'm kind of addicted to all those thoughts running through my brain, I'll admit it. Well, I listened to this and it was taught by a lovely woman. I don't know if I'm going to say her name correctly, but anyway, so I won't because I don't know it. And I did this 13-minute and I followed it. I'm a great visualizer, so having somebody guide me was a really. And in that first, I'll just briefly explain it for the listeners. There's a couple of different ways to breathe, and then you are saying in your awareness, following the breath with the words Hong, and Hong on the in-breath and Saw on the out-breath. And something happened to me. And I'm as shocked as anybody because I would have never thought. I actually wanted to do it again. Something about and I said this to you, maybe in an email after our first time we did a radio show together. Something in those words was encoded, and I'll use new age lingo, encoded, and I could tell that Yogananda had brought forward, my intuition was he had brought forward something of deep lineage, and that song, and it was words that were more than a mantra, and that they actually made vibration in me. And I'm telling you, I was hooked. And I started doing this, following this every night before I went to bed. And I'm like that that person who quit smoking, and I'm going to try to get everybody around me to quit smoking anyway. It was transformative for me because I was the person who was the most shocked that I actually wanted to do this again. And what I found was my sleep wasn't disrupted by all of this noise that it usually had. And when I'm at work and I'm in a busy physician office and get triggered by people, and I have high standards that not everybody chooses to go with, they don't, I think I'm always right. I'm calm at work, literally within 1 or 2 times of doing this. I have I'm more tolerant. I'm able to bring myself out of a triggered response. And I am seeing things from this chill place that Sharon Martin doesn't have that in her vocabulary. Well, I do now. So tell me about this Hong. We have a few minutes left. Hong Saw meditation, because it hooked me. It hooked me on the very first time, and it had benefits. So I keep doing it.
Well, that's wonderful. And that's the meditation technique I started with. And I can't pretend to have had such a great experience the first time, but I did have an experience after doing it for a few weeks that was very moving. And that was when I really became hooked as well, that something changed inside me. I was able to access a feeling, an awareness that was wonderful. And it was calming, and it was all the things you mentioned. The words hung and saw are from the Sanskrit, and they literally mean I am he, or I am spirit. So in the sort of meaning sense, you're affirming your connection to universal consciousness, to the superconsciousness beyond your normal everyday waking consciousness. On a more subtle level, you're intoning the meaning. One of the sort of more esoteric things about Sanskrit is that it's said that the actual vibration of the words contains the meaning of the words. So hung, whether it's translated as I am, means I am. So I think that's part of what you probably experienced was the coding, the vibration of those words literally began to resonate within your consciousness and had a transformative effect that goes beyond just the literal meaning of the words. So there's that. And then there is the effectiveness of the technique to help you slow your mind down. We tend to want to think about something, particularly when we're, awake. But when we sit down to meditate, we also tend to keep wanting to think about something. And we have this kind of running dialogue of things that have been going on in our day that come into our mind, and we start thinking about them, and then they carry us away. And 10 minutes later, we realize, oh, I never actually got around to meditating. I just have been thinking for 10 minutes. So accepting that reality that the mind wants to think about things, the way the Hung Saw technique works is it asks you to think about something, and that is your breath. It asks you to watch your breath so that when you inhale, you mentally say hung, and when you exhale, you mentally say saw. You'll undoubtedly get distracted and start thinking about things, but if you do, don't scold yourself, don't worry about it. Just come back to watching the breath and saying hung and saw. Don't try to control your breathing. You're not trying to slow it down. You're not trying to make it deeper. You're not trying to do anything. You're just watching it and intoning that hung and saw mentally with the inhalation and the exhalation. After a while, you will probably find that your breathing slows down and that you're less aware of the breath as the physical process of your lungs expanding and contracting. And as that happens, it's a good idea to shift your attention to your nostrils. So when you breathe in through the nostrils, you will naturally feel a cool sensation in the nostrils. And when you breathe out, you'll feel a warm sensation. So you can kind of shift your attention from the breathing in the lungs to this sensation of cool and warm in the nostrils. And that will tend to also naturally sort of go farther and farther up inside your nose until you reach the point between the eyebrows, that your attention becomes focused at this point. Continue to just say hung and saw, focus your attention at the point between the eyebrows. And with practice, you may begin to see light at this point. You may begin to generally see light around yourself, within yourself. You may find your breath is really slowing dramatically, that your heart rate is slowing. You may feel a great peaceful release of tension.
That's the part I loved immediately is I'm just floating in this. There's nothing prickly. There's everything is hunky-dory. It just is this peaceful, content. And then there's this undercurrent of happy.
Yeah. Well, Yogananda defined the experience of the divine, the actual experience, not the definition of it, but how we actually experience it, as ever new joy. That the essence of the divine is joy, ever changing, never something that we get tired of, like many other pleasures and joys we experience in life. But ever new joy is the essence of our experience of God or spirit or source or whatever you want to think of it as. And that naturally bubbles up within us as we become calm.
And, I think most healthcare providers and healthcare workers of all types would say this. Early 2020 made my life as a physician unbelievably rough. And I won't go into details because we only have about a minute and a half left. But you brought the COVID and the thought forms of all that fear and just people sick that should never have gotten sick, people dying, should have never died, to now be able to achieve that peaceful place and to be able to have that. This blows my mind. It's kind of rhetorical, but to have that 15 minutes before I go to bed now actually carry forward into the days ahead. So, this just brings me to what we should finish up on. What would you wish for people, Joseph? We have a minute left.
I would wish for anyone who hasn't tried meditation for who knows what reasons, defining themselves as I'm not a meditator kind of person, or my mind is crazy, I could never slow it down. Whatever the reason, my wish would be that you just try it. Give it a real try. Don't sit down and try it for 5 minutes and say, yeah, doesn't work. I knew it all the time. But really try it for a week or two. Try Hong Sau. It's available on my website, by the way. Detailed description of how to practice Hong Sau, which is on the josephselbie.com website. But even if you don't try Hong Sau, try a meditation technique. Try to experience it. It is the single most transformative, improving, life-changing thing you can do.
I love that. And I concur. Hong Sau changed my life. I'm not great, at all the other stuff, but that, even if you do that, man, it's worth it. So everybody, we need to close. I'm sorry to say, but thank you, Joseph, for being here with us. Joseph Selbie and his book, Break Through the Limits of the Brain. And you can see the Hong Sau on his website, josephselbie.com. And thank you, Joseph. I'm so glad you were here with us.
My pleasure to be with you. Let's do it again.
All right. Thank you. We'll sign off now. See you guys another time. You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin.
Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.